For more than 2 decades, the small black safe remained locked behind a concealed panel inside a private room once used by the Queen Mother. Only 3 people were believed to know its combination. But when palace archivists finally opened it, they discovered something that instantly changed the atmosphere inside the royal household. A sealed memorandum bearing the Queen Mother's signature and Camilla's name written across the front in unmistakable black ink. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Palace archivists had entered Clarence's house to catalog possessions omitted from an old estate inventory. An estate inventory is the official record listing property, documents, jewelry, and personal objects left after someone's death. Behind a hinged wooden panel in a restricted room, they found a heavy black safe that had not been officially opened since shortly after the Queen Mother died. Anne was summoned before anyone touched the lock because her name appeared inside the handwritten access register stored beside it. The register recorded who had permission to enter or handle the collection. William arrived minutes later, guarded and uneasy, while Charles received a private message warning him that an unopened family archive had been discovered inside the residence. Charles entered expecting sentimental correspondence or forgotten jewelry records. Instead, an archivist placed a cream envelope before him. The king's expression changed when he read the inscription. It carried his name, followed by a second instruction, regarding Mrs. Parker Bowles and the future dignity of the crown. Camilla knew nothing of the discovery. The queen consort noticed aides moving through the corridor and demanded to know why Anne and William had entered a sealed room without her. When her questions received careful, incomplete answers, she ordered her private secretary to discover what the family was hiding. The central revelation was devastating. The signed memorandum warned Charles that Camilla must never receive authority over the Queen Mother's private royal collection, wear certain historic family pieces, or use that legacy to strengthen her future public position. A memorandum is a written record, preserving instructions, judgments, or warnings for later action. This one was unmistakably personal. The archivist then uncovered a second document beneath it, a binding legacy instruction, transferring control of the restricted collection to Anne, and after her, William. He slowly set down his pen when he realized the order could still determine who controlled some of the monarchy's most emotionally significant objects. Charles continued reading until Anne noticed a paragraph marked by a red line. The princess pointed to it without speaking. It described a private promise the king had once made to his grandmother, a promise Camilla had never been told existed. The safe had revealed the Queen Mother's warning, but the true danger lay in understanding why she had written it, and what Charles had promised her in return. The document did not strike every person in the room in the same way. To Charles, it was the voice of a formidable grandmother returning from the past. To Anne, it was proof that an old boundary had been deliberately ignored. To William, it was another painful reminder that private royal choices could one day become public burdens. And for Camilla, still waiting outside the truth, silence itself was becoming a warning. Charles had spent years defending his marriage and protecting Camilla's position inside the monarchy. The Queen Mother's memorandum threatened more than control of jewelry or private possessions. A memorandum is a formal written record preserving instructions, warnings, or decisions for future action. This one challenged the emotional story the king had built around loyalty, redemption, and the belief that time had finally legitimized every choice he made. Anne understood the document differently. The princess remembered how fiercely her grandmother guarded family symbols, and how carefully she separated private affection from constitutional responsibility. William looked beyond the immediate pain. As heir, he knew that any hidden dispute involving historic jewels, inheritance, or Camilla's status could eventually become his responsibility to resolve. Charles sat alone at the end of the archive table and reread the opening paragraph. His hand remained pressed against the page long after his eyes stopped moving. Anne watched him without speaking. William turned toward the window, deliberately giving his father the privacy that the discovery had already taken from him. Camilla waited in a nearby sitting room as the minutes stretched into something unbearable. The queen consort demanded answers from her private secretary, but the official offered only careful fragments. When he finally admitted that the safe contained material connected to the Queen Mother, she gripped the arm of her chair. "Is my name in it?" The secretary hesitated. Camilla understood before he spoke. The memorandum revealed that the Queen Mother's fear had gone beyond personal dislike. She believed royal history might eventually be rewritten around Camilla, and that objects associated with previous queens could be used to manufacture dynastic acceptance. Dynastic acceptance meant creating the appearance that generations of the royal family had formally embraced someone, even when the private record told a different story. William then discovered one restricted item, described only as the blue case. No jewel was named. The document simply ordered that its contents remain beyond Camilla's reach, under all circumstances. Anne recognized the phrase immediately. The princess refused to explain it until every page had been examined. Charles reached the paragraph marked in red. It recorded a private conversation held years earlier at Birkhall, during which he had accepted his grandmother's conditions. His face tightened because he remembered that night and the person who had overheard part of it. To understand why that promise had been demanded, the family would have to return to the evening when the Queen Mother decided that Camilla had crossed an irreversible line. The warning inside the safe had not been written in a moment of vague disapproval. It had been triggered by one specific incident, a private dinner at Birkhall in the autumn of 1998. What began as a carefully controlled family gathering ended with the Queen Mother asking Charles to remain behind after every other guest had left. By midnight, a promise had been made, a door had been closed, and Camilla's future had been quietly restricted. The Queen Mother treated royal possessions as more than decoration. To her, jewelry, portraits, rooms, and handwritten records carried the emotional memory of the monarchy. A private collection meant objects owned and controlled personally, rather than held for general crown use. Whoever wore those pieces appeared to receive approval from the generation that had guarded them, and she understood how powerfully that symbolism could reshape history. Charles had already begun trying to create a gradual path toward Camilla's public acceptance. Private visits were becoming more frequent, trusted friends were being consulted, and quiet conversations had started about how she might eventually stand beside him without reopening every wound surrounding their relationship. The prince believed patience could turn controversy into legitimacy. His grandmother feared patience might instead allow the past to be rewritten. The breaking point came during the Birkhall dinner. Camilla noticed a sapphire and diamond brooch resting inside an open display case, and remarked that it would look entirely natural at a future public engagement. The Queen Mother heard the words from the doorway. She did not argue. She ordered the case closed immediately. Silence followed the guests out of the house. The Queen Mother kept Charles behind and confronted him alone. She told her grandson that affection could not erase consequence, and that no woman should wear history as though it had forgotten the pain surrounding her arrival. Charles became defensive. He argued that Camilla could not be punished forever, and insisted that public cruelty should not determine private family choices. His grandmother refused to soften the boundary. She demanded a direct promise. Camilla would never control the private collection, never wear the sapphire brooch, and never use any object connected to the Queen Mother as proof of personal endorsement. Charles reluctantly agreed, believing the restriction would remain an unwritten family understanding. A senior dresser overheard the final exchange while retrieving a jewelry ledger from the adjoining room. Days later, the Queen Mother dictated the memorandum, signed the legacy instruction, placed the brooch inside a blue velvet case, and locked everything inside the hidden safe. Anne finished reading the archive and then lifted the blue case. It was empty. The removal record carried a recent date. 3 months earlier, the brooch had been released for inspection on Camilla's direct request. The old promise had now collided with a new and dangerous fact. The one object Camilla had been forbidden to touch had somehow entered her household. Camilla entered the archive room believing she was about to challenge an insult from the past. Instead, she found Charles seated beneath a portrait of his grandmother, Anne standing beside the open safe, and William holding the empty blue case. No aides remained in the room. No one offered her a chair. Then Charles lifted the memorandum, looked directly at his wife, and asked the question that changed the confrontation completely. "Did you know what she had forbidden?" Camilla knew her name appeared in the Queen Mother's papers, but she had not been told about the binding instruction or Charles's promise. A binding instruction is a written direction intended to remain enforceable after the author's death. The Queen entered ready to argue that the fears of an earlier generation should not control the position she held today. William had insisted that no lawyers or courtiers attend because he wanted one fact established first. Had the brooch been removed by mistake, through routine administration, or by deliberate deception? Charles placed the signed memorandum between them. Camilla read the sentence denying her access to the private collection, then looked at her husband in disbelief. Anger came first. Hurt followed. The king had known about the restriction for years, and had never warned her that one wrong request could expose an old family judgment before everyone. Camilla accused Charles of allowing her to walk blindly into humiliation. He answered that he believed time had made the promise irrelevant. Anne cut across him sharply. The princess said a promise did not disappear simply because keeping it had become inconvenient. Camilla turned toward William and demanded to know whether he considered her unworthy. The prince did not answer the emotional accusation. Instead, he opened the empty blue case and lifted the inventory card hidden beneath its lining. The card showed that the sapphire brooch had been released after a handwritten authorization arrived from Camilla's office. An inventory card records where an item is stored, when it moves, and who approved that movement. Her initials appeared at the bottom. Camilla denied signing it. Then she revealed something none of them expected. During preparations for a recent state banquet, the Queen had been shown the brooch and encouraged to consider wearing it. She refused, after a dresser quietly warned that its provenance was too sensitive. Provenance means the recorded history of an object's ownership and use. Someone had therefore tried to place the forbidden piece directly into her wardrobe while hiding the Queen Mother's restriction from her. Charles ordered the authorization examined immediately. Anne studied the handwriting above Camilla's initials and recognized it before anyone else spoke. It belonged to a senior royal household official who had served the king for more than 20 years. The confrontation had exposed a wounded marriage, but the forged authorization revealed something even more dangerous: a hidden effort inside the palace to overturn the Queen Mother's decision. Royal power is rarely exercised through raised voices alone. It moves through signatures, inventories, trustees, sealed instructions, and the quiet authority to decide which objects appear in public. As Charles and Camilla struggled with the personal betrayal, Anne followed the paper trail. What she discovered was not a random administrative error. Someone had been trying to transfer control of the Queen Mother's legacy and had nearly succeeded without the family noticing. Anne began with the legal structure surrounding the restricted collection. It belonged to a private legacy trust rather than the ordinary working royal collection. A legacy trust is an arrangement that preserves property under specific instructions after its original owner has died. The safe's documents gave the princess immediate supervisory authority, while William would become successor guardian as his responsibility for the crown increased. Charles could request access, but even the king could not simply rewrite the instruction alone. Camilla held no independent authority over the collection. That was why the memorandum still carried real force after so many years. It had not survived merely as an old opinion. It remained attached to a protected chain of control. Anne summoned the senior household official to a small office with William beside her. The princess placed the authorization on the desk and asked him to identify the handwriting. He avoided her eyes, removed his glasses, and finally admitted that he had prepared the request. The official claimed he had been told the king wanted old restrictions quietly normalized. Charles heard the recorded admission soon afterward and felt the betrayal personally. The man had served him through scandal, family transition, and years of public pressure. When the monarch demanded to know whether his name had been used deliberately, the official answered that protecting Camilla's dignity had become an unspoken expectation throughout the household. The investigation uncovered a wider plan. Several Queen Mother pieces were scheduled to appear during an approaching state banquet. Camilla would wear the sapphire brooch first. A later catalogue would describe the collection as part of the Queen's continuing inheritance, creating the impression that the legacy had naturally passed into her care. Anne understood the strategy immediately. It would have achieved symbolically what the trust prohibited legally. Once the brooch appeared on Camilla before cameras and foreign guests, the image would suggest acceptance. No hidden memorandum could easily undo that public meaning. The safe had been opened only days before the banquet. The deception had been stopped at the final moment. William urged Charles to remove the brooch from the royal wardrobe and suspend the official immediately. The king agreed to recover the piece, but he resisted making the suspension public. He feared another scandal, another humiliation, and another wound to Camilla. Anne refused to accept silence as accountability. Charles now had to choose between protecting a loyal servant, defending his wife, and honoring a promise made to the woman whose warning had just prevented a historic deception. By the following morning, the secret could no longer be contained within the archive room. The state banquet wardrobe had been altered. A senior official had vanished from the palace schedule. Anne had ordered every object linked to the Queen Mother returned for inspection, and inside the king's private apartments, Camilla sat before an untouched breakfast tray, realizing that the greatest humiliation was not the old woman's warning, it was that members of the modern household had tried to help her defy it. The palace moved quickly. Jewelry selections were frozen, historic pieces were recalled, and inventory officers began checking every movement from the previous 5 years. An inventory review is a formal examination of where valuable objects have been stored, moved, displayed, or worn. The suspended official lost access to royal residences, while staff were warned that no item connected to the Queen Mother could leave storage without Anne's written approval. Camilla's state banquet appearance had to be redesigned without explanation. The historic sapphire ensemble was replaced by a modern diamond set carrying no connection to the restricted collection. Dressers noticed the change. Senior aides asked questions. No one received a complete answer. Camilla finally asked for the sapphire brooch to be brought to her one last time. The queen consort did not open the case. She held it for several seconds, feeling the weight of a history that had never truly welcomed her. Then she pushed it across the table. "Take it back to Anne." Charles tried to comfort her, but she pulled away. Camilla accused the king of fearing his grandmother's memory more than his wife's pain. He answered that the crisis was no longer about whether the Queen Mother had approved of their marriage. Someone had used his authority to break a promise he had already failed to honor himself. That betrayal now threatened them both. William uncovered the next layer during the inventory review. The brooch had not been the only target. 2 handwritten letters and a miniature portrait were also requested for an exhibition titled The Continuity of Royal Women. An exhibition is a public display arranged to tell a historical story through selected objects. Camilla had been positioned as the final figure, creating a direct line from the Queen Mother's generation to her own. Anne found the draft caption. It claimed the Queen Mother had gradually accepted Camilla's future place within the monarchy. The words directly contradicted the signed memorandum. Someone had not merely attempted to move jewelry, they had tried to rewrite the historical record. Camilla read the false caption and stopped defending herself. She requested a private meeting with William. This time, she did not ask him to protect her from the discovery. The Queen said she wanted to reveal who first proposed using the collection and why she had originally agreed. The fallout had stripped away Camilla's anger, leaving behind a confession that could either deepen William's distrust or change the direction of the entire crisis. There were no secretaries, lawyers, or palace advisors in the room when Camilla finally sat opposite William. The future king arrived expecting excuses. Instead, she placed the draft exhibition proposal between them and admitted that she had approved its central idea. She had wanted one image, one historic object, to prove that she had finally been accepted. But as William listened, it became clear that the safe had exposed more than ambition. It had exposed a woman still fighting a battle with the past. Camilla explained that the exhibition had grown from years of public comparison with previous royal women. Advisors told her that placing her inside the Queen Mother's visual legacy would silence questions about whether she truly belonged at the center of the monarchy. A visual legacy is the story created through portraits, jewelry, clothing, and objects repeatedly associated with a royal figure. Camilla understood how powerful that story could become. The Queen admitted that she had not known about the written prohibition. She had, however, always known the Queen Mother had never warmly embraced her. Approving the exhibition was therefore not innocent. It was an attempt to claim symbolic acceptance without confronting the painful truth that such approval had never been given. Camilla told William she had spent years believing endurance would eventually erase resentment. Every duty completed, every insult absorbed, and every public appearance survived had seemed like another step toward legitimacy. Wearing the sapphire brooch would have felt like winning a verdict from a woman who was no longer alive to offer one. William answered without cruelty, but he did not soften the boundary. The prince said royal objects could not be used to settle private wounds because the public read them as statements of history. He also admitted that he understood the danger of palace narratives. He had watched a parent's life become simplified, rearranged, and repeatedly interpreted by people with their own interests. Camilla then named the suspended official. He had transformed her vague wish for inclusion into a deliberate plan. The man assured her that no binding restriction existed, and argued that Charles's reign offered the final opportunity to establish a permanent version of her story. The Queen produced a handwritten note. It showed that she had personally ordered the brooch removed from the banquet selection before the safe was opened. Her motives had been complicated, but she had ultimately refused to wear it after sensing that its history was being concealed. William left with a changed position. He would not support the exhibition or permit the memorandum to disappear. Yet he told Anne that Camilla should be allowed to return the brooch through an honest act of accountability, rather than endure a staged humiliation. The private confession did not erase the past, but it created a path toward something the palace had avoided from the beginning, an honest public reckoning. The leak reached the outside world before the palace could complete its response. By sunrise, broadcasters were speaking of a forbidden brooch, a hidden memorandum, and a royal promise broken for decades. Yet the moment that defined the story did not come from an anonymous source or a television commentator. It came when Camilla stepped from her car at Clarence House, carrying the blue velvet case herself, with Anne waiting at the entrance beneath a wall of camera flashes. The palace confirmed that documents from the Queen Mother's private archive had been recovered, and that several restricted items were under review. A private archive is a protected collection of personal records, objects, and instructions not automatically treated as ordinary palace property. Officials did not publish the full memorandum, but they acknowledged that an historic order governing the collection remained valid. Public debate divided immediately. Some commentators argued that the discovery proved Camilla had never received full acceptance from the older royal generation. Others focused on the attempted manipulation of the archive. To them, the real scandal was not an old woman's private judgment, but a modern effort to manufacture approval that had never existed. Camilla chose to answer through action. The Queen Consort arrived at Clarence House without Charles beside her, holding the blue case in both hands. Anne waited at the entrance. Neither woman spoke for several seconds. Then Camilla passed the case forward, and the Princess Royal accepted it with one restrained nod. The exchange carried no triumph. It looked like accountability stripped of ceremony. Charles watched the live coverage in silence. When the camera caught Camilla turning back toward the crowd alone, the king lowered his head. William stood nearby and told his father that permitting the handover had been painful but necessary. The prince understood the humiliation, yet hiding the truth would have deepened it. The next morning, a national newspaper printed the image beneath one stark headline: "The promise returned." The photograph transformed the crisis from a dispute over jewelry into a reckoning over memory, legitimacy, and who possessed the right to define royal history. Public sympathy shifted again that evening. A prominent broadcaster revealed the false exhibition caption, reading its claim of the Queen Mother's gradual acceptance beside the wording acknowledged by the palace. Viewers now saw how advisors had exploited Camilla's insecurity while attempting to alter the historical record. Her ambition remained part of the story, but so did the manipulation surrounding it. Charles then authorized a final settlement. The restricted collection would remain under Anne's control. The false exhibition would be abandoned, and the palace record would acknowledge both the broken promise and Camilla's voluntary return of the brooch. The public had witnessed the symbol being surrendered. Now the king had to decide what truth would be preserved when the palace wrote the final record. The final decision was made not in a crowded council chamber, but in the same room where the safe had been opened. Charles returned to the archive table with Anne, William, and Camilla beside him. The memorandum lay at the center, no longer hidden and no longer treated as an inconvenience from another age. For the first time, each of them understood that the document's true power did not come from resentment. It came from the promise it demanded. Charles formally recognized the Queen Mother's legacy instruction. A legacy instruction is a binding direction controlling how private property and records must be handled after their owner's death. The restricted collection would remain under Anne's supervision and eventually pass into William's care. The sapphire brooch returned to its blue case and secure archival storage. Camilla would never wear it or use it to suggest an endorsement that had never been given. The king also canceled the proposed exhibition permanently. Every false caption would be destroyed. The suspended official would be removed from royal service, and an independent review would examine how private records had been manipulated. Charles understood why this mattered. If royal history could be altered to protect one living person, no private instruction would remain safe from ambition. Charles turned toward Camilla and apologized for concealing the promise. His silence, he admitted, had left her vulnerable to advisors offering symbolic acceptance through deception. The queen consort did not ask him to challenge the memorandum. She answered that belonging could not be created by wearing something another woman had deliberately withheld. Anne closed the blue case and placed its key before her brother. The Princess Royal had defended the boundary from the moment the safe opened, yet she gave Charles one final opportunity to claim control. He looked at the key, then pushed it back toward her. Some responsibilities, the king finally accepted, had to remain beyond his personal wishes. William watched the exchange and recognized the choice his father had made. Charles was no longer protecting emotional comfort at the expense of institutional truth. The archive record was amended completely. It would state that the Queen Mother maintained firm restrictions concerning Camilla, that Charles accepted those conditions, and that the brooch was later removed through an unauthorized effort to reshape history. Camilla asked for her own handwritten explanation to be preserved beside the memorandum. She accepted responsibility for wanting the collection's approval, denied authorizing the forged request, and recorded her decision to return the brooch once she understood the truth. The discovery did not remove her from the monarchy. It denied her only the borrowed legitimacy she had once desired. Charles honored a neglected promise. Anne protected the past. William defended the future. Camilla surrendered a symbol that was never hers to claim. The safe was locked again, but nothing essential remained hidden. The Queen Mother's boundary had been restored. Camilla had accepted its meaning, and the crown had finally chosen truth over the comfort of a rewritten past. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.